The great equalizer, right? That's a great quote. And I often say people are like, well, what is your product? And I say our product is opportunity. I mean, people mostly would say, well, it's books, right? And I say, no, I mean, sure, it's books, but it's more than that. It's opportunity. That's what I won't even say selling because we're giving it away.
Let's discover what people are building in the greater Cleveland community. We are telling the stories of Northeast Ohio's entrepreneurs, builders, and those supporting them. Welcome to the Lay of the Land podcast, where we are exploring what people are building in Cleveland and throughout Northeast Ohio. I am your host, Jeffrey Stern, and today I had the real pleasure of speaking with Tracy Strobel, the CEO of the Cuyahoga County Public Library. Tracy was appointed to lead the library system back in 2019 after serving as its deputy director for nearly 15 years, where she led the information technology, technical services, and literacy and learning divisions across its 27 branches. And with those 27 branches, the Cuyahoga County Public Library serves the 610,000 residents of the 47 communities in Northeast Ohio, and under Tracy's leadership has earned the prestigious 5-star rating in Library Journal's Index of Public Library Service for the last decade, and received the publication's highest overall score among America's largest metropolitan library systems for 10 consecutive years. This was really an amazing conversation. We covered Tracy's childhood dream of being a librarian, the history of the Cuyahoga County Public Library, the business and operations of libraries and how they actually work, their responsibility and role as a civic institution and bastion for education and the robust exchange of ideas, their evolution and relevance in an ever-dynamic and technologically enabled world, offering opportunity as a product, lesser known and unexpected services that libraries offer, and ultimately Tracy's vision for the future of the Cuyahoga County Public Library. If you cannot tell, I am personally a huge fan of libraries, and as Tracy and I will discuss, I think they are of the most underrated public institutions we have, and so it was a real treat to hear from Tracy about her experience leading the Cuyahoga County Public Library. So with that, please enjoy my conversation with Tracy Strobel after a brief message from our sponsor. Lay of the Land is brought to you by Impact Architects and by 90. As we share the stories of entrepreneurs building incredible organizations in Cleveland and throughout Northeast Ohio, Impact Architects has helped hundreds of those leaders, many of whom we have heard from as guests on this very podcast, realize their own visions and build these great organizations. I believe in Impact Architects and the people behind it so much that I have actually joined them personally in their mission to help leaders gain focus, align together, and thrive by doing what they love. If you too are trying to build great, Impact Architects is offering to sit down with you for a free consultation or provide a free trial through 90, the software platform that helps teams build great companies. If you are interested in learning more about partnering with Impact Architects or by leveraging 90 to power your own business, please go to ia.layoftheland.fm. The link will also be in our show notes. So I've been really looking forward to our conversation. I've been of this belief that libraries may be one of the most underrated public institutions that we have in our society today. And recently, actually, not intentionally in preparation for this, but I was reading Ben Franklin's autobiography, and I wrote down this passage on libraries that to me captured this power. And I would love to just read it to just put it out there as a preface to our conversation.
Go for it.
So he said that libraries improved the general conversation of the Americans. It made the common tradesmen and farmers as intelligent as most gentlemen from other countries, and perhaps have contributed in some degree to the stand so generally made throughout the colonies in defense of their privileges. Reading became fashionable, and our people, having no public amusements to divert their attention from study, became better acquainted with books, and in a few years were observed by strangers to be better instructed and more intelligent than people of the same rank generally are in other countries. The library afforded me the means of improvement by constant study. And so I like that.
Yeah, the great equalizer, right? That's a great quote. And I often say people are like, well, what is your product? And I say our product is opportunity. I mean, people mostly would say, well, it's books, right? And I say, no, I mean, sure, it's books, but it's more than that. It's opportunity.
Mm.
That's what I won't even say selling, because we're giving it away.
Right. I love that framing of libraries as opportunity. And as I was thinking about them in this kind of highest regard, I did realize that I do have very little understanding of all the work that you and your organization does to steward the greater Cuyahoga County Public Library at large, and how you think about it strategically and actually, operationally, kind of day to day, the challenges that you face, the history of the library system and how it came to become what it is today. And so, yeah, I just wanted to thank you for coming on and to share your story.
Absolutely. Yeah, most people aren't laying awake wondering how a library works behind the scenes, but I do. So that's all that I hope that's all that we need.
Yeah. Did you always lay awake and think about libraries when you were younger and think you would be working in them?
You know what? I will admit that I used to play librarian as a small child. I won't go into the detail about what that looks like, but I did, like, that was my playtime. I played librarian. So I guess I was born for this, but all through college, I would do everybody else's research for beer, I guess you could say. And I realized, I really could do this for the rest of my life. I could do this as a profession. Of course, I never do research now, including my own, but that's what really turned me on, was the act of finding the answers, right? It's like a giant treasure hunt. And so I fell in love with libraries just by finding really hard questions and just keep looking for the answers. And they were always there in a library.
That's amazing. How did your journey work professionally to find yourself in this kind of role?
Sure. So, at the risk of sounding like the world's biggest nerd, when I went to library school, and that is a thing, you get a master's in library science after you get a bachelor's degree. And my dream, and I was 21, was to be a government documents librarian. Maybe a law librarian, but I really wanted to be a government documents librarian, which, looking back, sounds dreadfully boring. No offense to any of the millions of government documents librarians listening right now. But thank God, when I got out of library school at the age of 22, I could not find a government documents librarian job to save my life. It was heartbreaking, devastating to my young self. And so I actually started working in manufacturing, in the technology end, like production and inventory control, trying to do cost accounting on machining and CNC work, and found out I had a real kind of just knack for picking up different technologies. So then I married the technology piece that I learned for 3 or 4 years in manufacturing with my library degree, and found a job in the public libraries focused on technology. And I stayed focused on technology for about the first decade of my career, and then came here to Cuyahoga County Public Library in a more general role as the deputy director, which was a huge leap, because I was literally working in jeans and flip-flops in the basement of Cleveland Public Library before I became second in charge here at Cuyahoga County Public Library. So I went from having like 1.5 people that reported to me to having a chain of command of over 400.
Wow. So that's amazing.
It was a leap, but I'm still here. So I guess that means I did okay.
Yeah. And I know you did some innovative work there as well in the development of the library system. So we'll circle back to that. But I love that you called out, that I don't think it's fair to judge a library's value to community by simply the books that it houses, right? And there's this whole concept of third place institutions,
right?
Where libraries and librarians, take on a function far beyond the purview of just lending out books and play this important, but maybe informal role in community and holding space for people to come together and sharing ideas and access to civic resources. So if you were to just provide an overview of what it is the Cuyahoga County Public Library is in our community, how would you describe it?
So that's really summed up in our mission statement by 4 things: read, learn, create, connect. And so I never want to discount reading and books as a huge part of what a library does. It's really easy to dismiss that and say, oh, but we're more than books. Well, I mean, we are largely books and reading. But right along with that is learning. So our programming is what brings people through the doors every day, especially the folks that are relying on our digital collection are still coming in for those learning opportunities, whether they're bringing in their kids for story time, a really traditional thing, or maybe they're bringing in their mom who just moved here from another country to learn English as a second language in our classes, and so much in between I won't get into, but that connecting piece also is so incredibly important. And you can connect with technology for sure if you don't have it, because we are the original sort of bridge of the digital divide. We've had the internet free in public libraries since the 90s, since the late 90s. But we're also connecting with each other, right? We're connecting as a community. It's a place to come to feel like you're a part of a community, especially in this day and age when so many people are working from home, spending a lot of time in their homes. It's that place they can go, like you said, the third space where they can just get a sense of the bigger world out there, or the small world, right? Just their neighbors meeting up. We have people just meeting here to read the paper and drink coffee every morning. And there's a recent report by the Surgeon General on isolation and like the health impact of isolation. Libraries are really the cure, or at least some of the medication to fight that.
Can you share a bit about the history of the Cuyahoga County Public Library and how it has evolved over time?
Sure. So last year we turned 100.
Wow.
So we were established in 1922. In Cuyahoga County, there were already 8 library systems in existence in 1922. So the state changed some laws and said we're only going to recognize and fund public libraries established. You can only come together as a system in a district as a public library, but we would grandfather in anything established before those laws changed. So anyway, there are other library systems in Cuyahoga County, but 100 years ago, we were established as a library district to serve the 47 communities that weren't already serviced by a library system. So we actually started out with just mobile services and classroom collections. It's a little known fact, we started out in the library of the Cleveland Public Library downtown. In the basement of the Cleveland Public Library downtown. So, we were taking books out to rural Cuyahoga County, right, that doesn't even exist anymore, and making sure that library services were brought into the individual communities. And then we began establishing physical branch spaces, and we're up to 27 branches, serving about 610,000 people, and going strong.
What in your mind is the role of a librarian?
We're all about providing services, right? We're all about connecting people with that opportunity that I mentioned, whether it's connecting people with a book to take to the beach, connecting people with a class, connecting people with, you wouldn't believe how many people still come in and say, I don't have an email account and I have to now finally get an email account. Like, we're still doing that every day. So we're helpers, we're community helpers, we're public servants, and we're here to provide a service. And sometimes that service is just, we're the only person that an elderly individual might speak to in that day. When they come in to read the paper, so many times I see when I visit our branches, just this incredible connection between individuals and our staff. And like I said, sometimes it's that only connection that individuals have in that given day. And sometimes it's, about teaching skills that people can't otherwise afford to learn to help with their workforce pursuits, or, maybe they've long wanted to learn how to use a sewing machine. Believe it or not, many of our branches have sewing machines and classes, and we have these incredible innovation centers that people can come and use tools that they're just curious about but can't afford to purchase on their own.
I mean, there really is this breadth of services. What are some of the non-obvious, non-traditional offerings that our libraries offer that most people wouldn't realize or be aware of?
So I talk about this all the time, and I think one of the things that surprises people the most is that here at Cuyahoga County Public Library, we have the largest toy lending library in the country. Public toy lending library. So we have thousands of toys. So if you are a parent who wants to try a toy before you buy it, or maybe you're a grandparent who wants to stock up on toys for out of town visiting grandchildren. Maybe you're an at-home daycare provider who wants to bring in different toys every week. So they're all developmentally appropriate. We actually offer toys for kids with disabilities. So that's a cool thing that we do. It's very unique, especially in such a large system. But you can get online, search the catalog, look at pictures, pick your toys, have them delivered to your local branch. We do passport applications. We've been doing this for over a decade, and that's a revenue stream for us because the State Department dictates a fee that we charge people to accept the passport applications. And we're so much nicer, obviously, than the post office, right? So a few years back, I think it might be about 10 years, we acquired 2 nonprofits and merged them together to provide a service called Aspire Greater Cleveland. And in this service, we offer basic literacy classes for adults. We offer GED prep and testing, so you can take your GED test after the months of preparation that it requires to be successful. We offer English as a second language classes, and we cannot satiate the need for ESOL classes in this region. And we offer citizenship test preparation. So that's something people don't realize we do. Aspire Greater Cleveland is a part of us. And it was, I always joke that it's the closest to mergers and acquisitions a librarian ever gets when we took on these 2 nonprofits that were kind of struggling. But it's all state funded. So there is a steady stream of state dollars that's distributed to entities around the state that offer these services. So we thought it made sense. It was on mission for us. So I mentioned those innovation centers. So like embroidery machines, banner printers, 3D printers, laser cutters, all the things supporting small businesses or supporting entrepreneurs that maybe want to have an idea and want to test it out, or maybe they have a cleaning company and want to embroider shirts for their crew or hats or mugs or something. So it's not just about sort of curating a collection on our shelves, but it's also creating content, and that's sort of the create part of our mission. A lot of surprising things. Last year for our 100th anniversary, we did a 100 things you could do at the library thing. And trust me, it was not hard to come up with that list of 100 things.
Yeah, I can only imagine. I think you've introduced this theme of technology a few times now. And I'm curious, in the face of rapid digitalization over time and kind of changing community needs, how the library system has attempted to, proactively remain relevant as the world around us is changing so rapidly.
Yeah. I mean, can you imagine if we were still just lending books, right? If we didn't evolve with the times, if we didn't, have this incredible digital collection of ebooks and audiobooks that people could download. That's why I think if you could kind of change your frame of mind to think about us, in terms of having the product of opportunity as opposed to just a physical thing or place. But we're constantly looking for new formats to lend, both high tech and low tech. Last year, we started in one of our branches that is adjacent to one of the metro parks, we started lending bikes. So you come in, check out bikes, take them for a bike ride and bring them back, right? It's just constantly evolving, like looking at what do people need in the community? We're like the original recycler or reuser, where you don't have to have everybody owning their own thing, and you can pool resources together so that people can share, whether it's equipment in an innovation center or bikes, or we loan Wi-Fi hotspots now. We have hundreds of Wi-Fi hotspots that are constantly on loan for people who can't afford or have recently lost access to the internet, or heck, people going on vacation or going camping and wanting a hotspot so they can continue to work and stay connected.
Yeah, I mean, we can stay on this challenge of the digital divide and literacy. I mean, one of the realities of Cleveland that really has just been astonishing to me was the illiteracy rate and how functionally, I think it's almost 2/3 of the city's population are functionally illiterate. And while this includes more than, I think, literacy in the context of reading, like, numeracy and comprehension and analytical skills, it's just kind of an uncomfortable fact that so many face this challenge here locally. I'm curious how you think about, what the responsibility of the library is in, working for that kind of education. And I imagine the digital divide piece comes into play a lot here as
Right.
well.
There's many forms of illiteracy, right? It's not just about reading, but it's largely about reading, unfortunately, in this region. And we do consider it our responsibility to improve those statistics. And we look at it kind of from two perspectives. It's super important is making sure that kids don't get too far in school before they are reading to learn, instead of just learning to read. And we have a number of programs in place, starting with the very youngest, teaching parents how to be their kids' first and favorite teacher, whether that's teaching them that it's important to read to babies, right? Like a lot of parents don't, they feel silly reading to their baby. They don't realize how critical it is forming that bond and forming that love of reading and that connection between parent, child, and book, and that being like the most safe and sacred combination. And then also making sure that as they start to approach preschool and kindergarten, that they have those skills. Our children's librarians are experts in making sure that the early literacy skills are being developed so that kids start preschool and kindergarten, ready to learn, ready to improve their reading skills and not starting from scratch. And then we have programs in place so that schools can identify kids who are at risk of, getting toward that third grade mark without having the necessary reading skills to transition. Once you start into fourth grade and beyond, you'll completely just lose track of the ability to learn and comprehend the material if you can't read proficiently. So we're very focused on early literacy skills and making sure that kids are successfully getting through the early grades. And so teachers can identify kids at risk and send them to the library after school where they're getting free tutoring, one-on-one tutoring. We have both paid and volunteer tutors who come in. So that's one part of it, right? Making sure that kids don't grow up having low literacy rates. But then we know for sure there are a number of adults in our region that are not reading, enough to be successful in the workforce. Or, like you said, it's digital literacy, it's financial literacy, consumer literacy. So we have programs in place. I mentioned that Aspire Greater Cleveland, and that's at the very base of that is those adult basic literacy skills where we have classes, tutors, a whole program in place to make sure that we're improving those skills and getting folks ready for the workforce.
And I imagine in addition to that, just access to technology
Right.
is a big part of, helping people overcome and just alleviate the challenges to acquiring those skills in the first place.
Exactly. So we do offer, free Microsoft Office classes, basic, intermediate, and even some advanced. We have computers in all of our branches that people can come in and use. Obviously, we have Wi-Fi access if they have their own device, but they don't have, an affordable connection to the internet. Sometimes that monthly fee is the first to go when you are struggling financially. So people can come in and use our gigabit of bandwidth here to stay ahead. But I think it's the classes and the help, really.
Yeah.
I mean, you can offer all the technology, but if you don't have a friendly face and a free class, people just aren't going to have the means to get ahead.
So a while back, we had Steve Potash on the podcast, who founded and runs Overdrive, which, for those listening in, who don't remember, it's a local company here in the area that manages, I think, the largest global network of digital book lending.
Yeah, by far.
40,000 libraries across the world. How has having such an innovative company locally in the space influenced your approach to, the whole digital transformation, and what does that partnership look like?
Yeah. First, I want to say I'm a huge fan and friend of Steve's. I like to brag about this, so I'm going to do it. I was at the very first meeting. I was with Cleveland Public Library at the time, the very first meeting with Overdrive, where we talked about what would it look like, right, to lend ebooks to libraries.
Oh, wow.
And very fond memories of being at the table in his little office in Valley View. And he is just took such a huge risk. Is just the very definition of an entrepreneur. And of course, now he's incredibly successful and giving back to our community, and including giving back to libraries. and we're one of their biggest customers. So it's been a fantastic partnership over time. And like at any given moment, with any particular frustration over the years we may have had with his products, just pick up the phone and throw ideas at him. And he's such a great listener. So I am proud of the fact that I've helped, along with a couple of my colleagues here, have helped shape what that service is and what his product is. And like I said, he's incredibly generous, giving back to the local communities and libraries as a whole. He's a real champion for public libraries globally.
In addition to Overdrive, I mean, you've had a front row seat to the evolution of library technology, from participating in it to, services that you've adopted. What emerging technologies do you believe will shape the future of libraries, and how are you positioning the Cuyahoga County Public Library to capitalize on them?
I think, honestly, the digital collection is, and as it improves, gets easier to use. I certainly hope that the publishing side of this dynamic starts to get more with the times. But I do think that provides the greatest opportunity for libraries to remain relevant, but also just, how as different technologies emerge and the average person wants exposure to those technologies, whether it's, software or equipment, just innovative tools. I think the greatest opportunity exists for libraries to be sort of that first access point to that technology. With our innovation centers, for example, we have several of them around the county. They have some core equipment that all of them have, and each of them sort of specializes in different areas. But it's sort of the starter version of going to a makerspace. You might start there, learn a few things, and then be inspired to go on to like Case Western or bigger and greater things. But for the average person, it's not intimidating. There's help there all the time, and not just help from our staff, but help from the community of makers that it creates locally for people. So it's kind of that high tech but high touch combination that I think really is where libraries can excel and find their place in sort of the ever-changing landscape of technology. It just makes sense, right? Because we have I don't know what we're up to now, 3 or 4 of these incredible $18,000 embroidery machines, right? That you could just never afford to get for yourself unless you're like already, launching into that particular world. But, we can pool everybody's resources together and offer access and help with that machine for anybody who walks in the door.
When you think about the business of libraries, you kind of mentioned the acquisitive, mergers and acquisition activity you were doing. And I believe you've led some of the most extensive capital improvement programs in the library's history. Can you tell us a bit more about what strategically goes into planning for the library and how you in kind of that business aperture, how you evaluate things like return on investment in the library context?
Yeah. So people people are always surprised. They think we're just very casual about this, but we're 27 buildings plus an administrative headquarters. We have about 750,000 square feet of facilities alone. So anybody who has that kind of footprint across an area knows what it takes to keep that running, whether it's, keeping the roof up to date, the parking lot in good shape, the snow plowing and the landscaping. And it's a whole business. We have a whole fleet of vehicles for delivering and maintaining our buildings, all the technology that goes behind it. We have a little over $90 million operating budget. So it is big business here, maintaining that just infrastructure to make sure that our spaces are accessible and available. We're open 65 hours a week in 27 places. So, if you compare it to a grouping of bank branches or, a fleet of Starbucks, it's a huge footprint across this county, and it's a lot to run. And there are a lot of behind the scenes operational things that, nobody ever thinks about, and that's good. I don't want them thinking about it, because if they don't think about it, right, they must be working. But we do a lot of things centrally, sort of that, just for efficiency's sake. That's a real passion of mine. What can we do centrally so that we can maximize the amount of time our staff out in the branches can interface with the public? Because that's the one thing we can't do from a headquarters perspective. So whether it's purchasing and processing the materials, maintaining the technology centrally, everything that we can do behind the scenes to make life easier for the staff and the public out in the branches, what we do in terms of kind of logistically running the place. We also, of course, have to market and promote ourselves, right? Because I think you mentioned when we opened up that it's kind of an underrated public asset. So it's always a challenge to make sure that people have an awareness of all the different things that we offer, and all that we can do to help improve quality of life. So there's that whole piece of it. We do some fundraising as well. Like there's a ton of behind the scenes stuff that's fascinating. But like I said, if the general public isn't thinking about it, then I must be doing my job.
Yeah. And understanding that most of the time, I can see why you wouldn't want everyone to be thinking about those things. But if you indulge me on this detour for a moment, sure. what would you want people to know about what goes on behind the scenes that none of us are really aware of?
I think that whole analysis of meeting needs and evolving needs, there's a real science to making sure we have the right books in each of the libraries in each of the different communities, or the right programs. So I will say my favorite part about this job and this library system and this region is the diversity, right? So we have branches, these 27 branches across the suburbs of the city of Cleveland. The range is incredible. It's Strongsville to Brecksville. It's Bay Village to Bedford. It's Maple Heights to Mayfield Village. Every community is really different. And we work very hard to create spaces that fit the community, to create collections that fit the community, learning opportunities that meet the needs of people. They're not just different demographically, but they're different in what the interests are. We pay a great deal of attention by looking at trends and analyzing data. Just anecdotal stories are important too, doing surveys. We really care about not being a cookie cutter institution, about really meeting and connecting with people in each community.
Right. And that in this business context is kind of a disciplined product management approach to it.
Yeah. I mean, there are obviously millions and millions of books that we could choose from to buy, and very limited shelf space in our facilities. That's been a real trend in libraries, frankly, is that the space for books has given way to space for people. So making those choices about what to offer people is a real science. And we have a great team behind the scenes. And of course, we also have cooperative borrowing, so that if you don't find what you're looking for in Mayfield, maybe we can get it for you out of a library in Cincinnati or a university in Toledo, through our kind of cooperative arrangements. So there's a lot of collaboration, which I think really sets the library industry apart from typical, certainly from private sector, is how much collaboration goes on amongst libraries, locally and nationally.
Right. It is more collaborative than it is competitive.
We're just nice, and we share. That's at the core of what we do, right?
Right. Well, I was going to ask if the product is opportunity, how do you think about competition, in the context of libraries? Because
sure, I think we're just in that attention economy, right? So we're just constantly competing for people's attention, and we all have so many choices of what to do with our eyes and our ears these days. So reading in general is admittedly on the decline, again, because there are so many options out there. That quote you read in the beginning was talking about there's nothing else to do but read, essentially, and reading has made us all smarter. Well, it's sort of the opposite now, I have to admit. So I'll give you an example.
Sure.
A decade, 12 years ago, circulating physical DVDs was 40% of our circulation of physical materials. And now it's 2%.
Wow.
Nobody checks out DVDs anymore. When was the last time you watched a DVD, Jeff?
I couldn't tell you.
Do you know if your DVD player works, or if you even have one? I mean, we still have them, and there is still a market for them. We do still circulate them, but that shift in over a decade of our product, and we're competing with streaming, which we do have some streaming video resources, but we don't have the blockbuster stuff. We don't have the big streaming series that everybody's watching. So that's our competition. Our competition also is that place thing, right? Every time I go into a Starbucks or a Panera and see people all set up doing their work, I just want to go shake them, because they could have such a better climate and environment in their public library. They're not going to be on a wobbly, tiny table having to buy $5 coffee at their public library, and they can bring their $5 coffee if they'd like to, for sure. But making sure that people are aware that we are a great space to work and to spend time. It's not just a place where you come in and pick something up and leave.
Yeah, you're alluding to some of these, I think, already. But what are the biggest challenges that you think the system faces? And as the one leading the Cuyahoga County Public Library through them, how do you navigate those?
Yeah, certainly maintaining funding. We're publicly funded, obviously. We're very fortunate in 2020 to secure an additional $1 million operating levy that's continuing. So we don't have the intention of going back to the ballot for a number of years, but that is always a challenge. At any given point, the state could change its funding model for public libraries. So we're about 78%, 75 to 78% funded by our local taxes, property taxes, and the balance of that is then state dollars. And so, obviously losing 20 to 25% of our funding with the state would be devastating. And you never quite know from each biennium budget. We came out of this most recent one that passed at the end of June, or early July, very well, maintained our funding. But as the political winds change, that could be in jeopardy, and that would be devastating. So that, I think, is one of our greatest challenges. And the other is just, keeping in the front of people's minds when they think about what to do with their spare time, where to spend their time, again, what to do with their ears and their eyes, if it's going to be reading, if it's going to be listening to an audiobook. So we never want to take for granted that, libraries have been around forever. We're always going to be around. I'm the last person to take that for granted.
So I normally opt to avoid kind of political topics, but
sure.
I do want to ask how you're handling the reality of those today who are challenging books because they disagree with certain ideas or perspectives that are relayed through them. And it's kind of wild for me thinking back to books that helped shaped my childhood and experience, writers like Twain and James Baldwin, and, whose lives and observations and identities were obviously very different right. from my own, but in a way where the goal was to engage with difficult ideas and historical realities rather than censor and silence them. So as a library, as the institution that I think is most relevant for this kind of debate right now, how do you uphold that robust exchange of ideas, principle?
We take that responsibility very seriously, like that there's something in every library that is going to expose a reader to new ideas, new ways of thinking, new types of people. I'm a big believer in that reading, especially reading fiction, builds empathy and is really the answer to the divisions amongst us, between us. But you're right. I mean, libraries are being challenged nationally. The idea of censorship. I will say that we're quite fortunate in this region in Northeast Ohio. People generally have a really open mind and a strong belief that public libraries should have something for everyone. Or some people like to say public libraries should have something that offends everyone. But so we do see the occasional challenge to materials on our shelf, but it's rare. But my peers nationally, some of them spend all of their time fighting groups that would like to take materials out of libraries. And, I'm certainly not going to state on one side or the other. It's just our responsibility to make sure all sides are represented, and that it's the most important thing is that, you're welcome to disagree with anything on our shelves in any of our branches. It might be something that really meets a need for somebody else, and you're welcome to not take it and not borrow it, but you can't make that decision for another person or another parent. And so we just really focus on representing all sides of all issues.
What does success mean to you in this line of work?
Success means that people are using what we're providing, that people are taking advantage and finding opportunities, whether that's, within the walls of our buildings or within our digital services and collections, that people are finding what they're looking for. Success is definitely, even if people aren't using us, they see the value in what it provides and what it brings to a community. We talked about libraries being the great equalizer, as you quoted when we started. And, you don't have to be in a place where you need to use a library to appreciate what what it can do for the culture, for the workforce, for creating communities that we all want to live in. That it's really an asset, and that's success to me. I mean, one of the biggest challenges since I became director, of course, we all went through the pandemic, and that was challenging in itself. But the bigger challenge is getting people back in our doors. And so year to date, this year over last, at this time of year, our door counts are up over 40%. And that's what success looks like to me. Like, people are coming back. And it's been it was kind of slow last year. And I'll admit to being super nervous, because we've invested a lot of tax dollars in building great buildings over the last decade. But this year, I'm feeling really rewarded by the fact that people are coming back into our buildings, whether just to sit and work, whether to enjoy a author visit, whether to learn a new skill, whether just to pick up stuff to borrow. People are coming, and that's success to me.
What are you most proud of?
I think going back to sort of securing several years of financial good standing is something I'm very proud of. We went to the ballot in 2020, the fall of 2020, which was a presidential election, the height of COVID, and we were very successful in obtaining additional funding at the continuing level, which to me means people appreciate and value what we're doing. And that's what I'm most proud of. I'm most proud of the fact that when you walk into one of our buildings, someone's going to say hi and welcome you, and you're going to feel like you're in a place where people are excited to see you, excited to help you, and want you to be part of the community. Librarians were once sort of gatekeepers of information, right? Kind of pre-internet. We held the keys to all knowledge, and changing and shifting that mindset. And now I like to think of us more as information concierge than gatekeeper, like, right? Because we're just helping to connect you with what you're looking for. And we're not like that gatekeeper to all knowledge and all knowing and judgment and all of that. So over my 30-year career, that whole mindset has shifted, and I'm proud of being a part of shifting to that real. We think of ourselves as the four seasons of library service, or if you have like a public service. We're Nordstrom, we're the high end. We go out of our way to help people, and kind of making sure that that's the experience people have when they enter one of our buildings is something I'm really proud of being a part of.
What's the future of the Dewey Decimal System?
The what? I don't know what that is. No, I'm kidding. The future is that we make it so easy for people to find what they're looking for that they don't need to have ever heard of the Dewey Decimal System or how it works.
I have such clear memories of trying to understand how it works.
I don't even know. I don't even think they teach that anymore. Like, really, it's our job to make sure we're either organizing the branches in a way that you don't need to know that, or helping you so that you don't need to know that. But, there's a few of us nerds out there who still know what it is.
Yeah, that's fun. Well, I know you've also had some international exposure to libraries, as well as a representative of U.S. library systems.
Yeah.
What is the conversation that's happening at a global level around libraries and their role at large? How does it differ, if it does, from the role they play here? And what insights have you gleaned that you think we can take from libraries internationally?
Yeah, so I was part of this global cohort of library innovators. I was the U.S. representative. It was funded by the Gates Foundation years ago, and so I had the chance to get great exposure internationally. And I will say that we're not the best in the world, but we're close. We're, believe it or not, chasing the Scandinavian countries who offer incredible library services. And I think the biggest impact for me, witnessing what they are doing there, how they marry social services and library services together, so that it's kind of the one-stop shop for people, whether they're looking for social aid or childcare or books and information, or it's all together in one place, which is also a trend that we're experiencing here. But creating that go-to spot, being more of a community center than having a separate library and community center and recreation center and social service offices and all those separate entities, kind of marrying those all together under one roof is a trend that I was exposed to and was really fond of. And, we're doing some work to try to bring those things together here. But, largely, I was just incredibly grateful for what we do have here and the support and the public support, the public dollars, whether that's local or state or in a few cases federal, because that, by and large, across the globe is not in existence. And libraries look nothing like, in most countries, look nothing like they do here, and certainly nothing like they do in Denmark or Sweden, where it's just even beyond what we're doing here.
When you think about the next 100 years, knowing that you do not take the institution's existence and presence for granted, what are you most excited about thinking about that future, and what are the investments that you're making today that you hope to see play out over the coming years?
Yeah, I've loved watching the trend, certainly accelerated by the pandemic, but existing beforehand, the trend of people working remotely. And I love the opportunity libraries have to sort of be a place to come together for those people who are leveraging technology to not be in an office space all day long. Yeah. So I see that certainly as a growth area for us. And let's see, what was the other part of your question?
The investments that you're making today that you're most excited about.
Okay. Well, these spaces that we're building, I mean, we're building places people want to spend time, and we're putting a lot of care and attention into the detail so that, the last thing I want is when you walk into a public library, it looks like, your high school from 20 years ago, or it looks like you're going in to apply for social services. Like, it cannot be sterile. It has to have comfort and personality and connection with your local, I always say that, your library needs to look a little better than your living room, or why would you come and spend any time there? So we made significant investments and continue to do so on space to be inviting, to attract people, because they have choices, and we want to be their top choice for spending some of their free time. We just broke ground on a new 25,000 square foot branch in the city of Brooklyn. Just broke ground last week. So we're about to start construction on that, and it's going to be gorgeous. We built a building in Bay Village last year. We opened a new branch, and the visits are up 54% over the year before. Like, people, it was just a concrete block before in Bay Village. Right. Like, why would you leave your lovely home to come to a ugly, sterile government building? And now it's just a stunning, welcoming, warm, there's a fireplace, there's a balcony, it's gorgeous.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground here. I know there's probably a lot of areas we could go a lot deeper into, but as we bookend the conversation here, no pun intended. Is there anything particularly important that is unsaid that we haven't spoken about yet that you want to share?
I'll just emphasize the fact that, even if you don't consider yourself a library person, right? So I'm not sure what your typical audience is, but I'm guessing a lot of entrepreneurs, business people, busy people, right? But if somebody's listening to this, they're also curious people. They're also creative people, and they're also probably people, right? And so utilizing your public library to kind of satisfy that curiosity, to learn new skills, to try new things, to meet new people. If you're not thinking of your public library as a way to sort of satisfy those interests or those needs, I hope that listening to this has changed your mind and that you'll visit us.
I hope so too. I would love that. Awesome. Well, I'll close with our traditional closing question.
Okay.
Which is for your favorite hidden gem in Cleveland, something that other folks may not know about that maybe they should.
Okay, well, I have to say a library, right? So I would say the South Euclid Lyndhurst Public Library, which in 2015 we opened a brand new one, closing a very traditional Tudor mansion library that many people are very fond of, but we've replaced it with a gorgeous facility, and especially if you have young children who you want to sort of inspire to love books and reading and libraries, bring them to that South Euclid Lyndhurst Branch Library, because the children's area is absolutely magical. We invest a lot in creating incredible youth spaces where there's as much play and craziness and imagination as there are books. So that's going to be my hidden gem.
I love that. Well, Tracy, I just want to thank you for coming on and sharing more about the work that you're doing. It's awesome.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation and the opportunity. It was really fun.
If people had anything they wanted to follow up with you about, where would be the best place for them to reach out, learn more?
Yeah, for sure. Probably just via my work email, which is tstrobel@cuyahoga-library.org.
Awesome. Well, thank you again.
Thank you.
That's all for this week. Thank you for listening. We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's show. So if you have any feedback, please send over an email to jeffrey@layoftheland.fm or find us on Twitter @podlayoftheland or @sternjefe, JEFE. If you or someone you know would make a good guest for our show, please reach out as well and let us know. And if you enjoy the podcast, please subscribe and leave a review on iTunes or on your preferred podcast player. Your support goes a long way to help us spread the word and continue to bring the Cleveland founders and builders we love having on the show. We'll be back here next week at the same time to map more of the land. The Lay of the Land podcast was developed in collaboration with the Up Company, LLC. At the time of this recording, unless otherwise indicated, we do not own equity or other financial interests in the company which appear on this show. All opinions expressed by podcast participants are solely their own and do not reflect the opinions of any entity which employs us. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions. Thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.